Are you considering moving to South Carolina, but wondering what's it really like? I mean, have you watched some videos online, seen some of the comments online, and curious, how much of a culture shock is it really moving to South Carolina? Well, back in 2015, my wife and I packed our bags after being born and raised in Southern California and relocated to Lexington, South Carolina, right outside of Columbia, after only visiting for a week. Now as a real estate agent, I've helped over 100 people buy and sell right here in the Midlands of South Carolina, a majority of them just like you relocating from other states, whether it was New York, Pennsylvania, Hawaii, California, Arizona, Texas, and so many others, and even got to talk to people some internationally now that got to visit the area. And so I got the perspective not only personally, but from everything y'all have told me. That's right. Welcome to the things that they don't tell you about South Carolina, the ultimate list. That's right, there's tons of videos out there that like to highlight the top 10 things, but I wanted to hit all of them. That way you don't have to go watch 10 videos to really get to the details. I'm diving into it all. Floodplains, poorly ranked drivers, poor infrastructure. Lastly, I'm gonna try and tackle the one that they don't want me to talk about, but you all beg me for, crime. Let's just hope I don't lose my license. Now, of course, remember, all of this comes down to perspective. Some of these things you may be like, Brandon, everybody knows that. There are similarities between a lot of states, but not everywhere is the same. Just because the state you lived in did it doesn't mean they all do it. So bear with me on those that you may be used to. And just so you know that this isn't clickbait, let's get started with the one that you all comment about the most. So that's right, South Carolina is ranked to have some of the worst drivers in the entire country. Out on the fact that the infrastructure just hasn't kept up with the growth, and let's just be real, the roads and traffic are not great. Now again, I've always said this comes down to perspective. Me coming from California doesn't think the traffic is that bad. But those that aren't from places like New York, California, Atlanta, that come from small towns often are taken by surprise of how bad the traffic can get, especially locals. They get pissed off all the time. You've probably seen it in the Facebook groups. And again, to me, one of the bigger issues is just kind of the whole infrastructure design. It doesn't seem like there was really any foreplanning for where things are gonna go, right? You got 2-lane roads kind of running every direction. You have schools spread out all around, kind of making it difficult to get from one school to another if you got kids in different grades. And of course, the big thing that I've always said is the lack of public transportation and the lack of sidewalks and bike trails, which forces everybody to just drive everywhere they need to go, even if it's just to go grab some ice cream downtown. I think it's kind of that case of small town America that grew up fast, really fast, and you ended up with kind of this urban sprawl versus kind of the suburban planning that you usually get. And a lot of people love to say we're full, but let me give you perspective of where I moved from, which will help in a lot of this other videos. Because it was once a small city with orange groves that eventually turned into a mall in the 90s. Fast forward to today, the city I grew up in currently sits at 221,345 people. Lexington County as a whole is 304,797, so you can see the comparison there. So when it comes to density, the town I grew up in is 3,232 people per square mile, where Lexington County is 390 people per square mile. And just for reference, Columbia is 1,000.64. Hopefully that makes you realize we're far from full here, I'm sorry. But I will say, as much as they like to blame you and I and all the transplants here, this has been an issue since long before you and I came. And when it comes to infrastructure, keep in mind, I'm getting a little ahead of myself because we are going to talk about politics a little bit later on, but this is a predominantly conservative state. And many times when the local counties push out to raise taxes for infrastructure, the citizens say absolutely not. We're not looking to have higher taxes here. We've given you plenty of money out of our taxes, so go ahead and find a way to use that money to fix the roads and stop asking for more money from us. All right, so speaking of cars, vehicle property taxes. Now, this is a big one that gets brought up and surprises people all the time. Again, remember perspective. In California, we had excessive DMV fees, so this was pretty much a wash for us, but I have so many people taken back by it. But of course, the biggest question is, how much are these property taxes really? And remember, this is property taxes just like when you're owning a home and you got to pay yearly property taxes. This isn't sales tax. So yes, every single year, whether you own that car car or you have a loan out, it's a lease, whatever, you're gonna have to pay these. Let me give you an idea though. So my most recent tax bill came, and I live in Lexington County, and the due total was $813.20 for the year. Now to give you an idea, they valued my car at $25,170. Now to give you an idea, Kelley Blue Book actually values my trade-in value, obviously the lowest you can get on there, at $33,000. So again, I talk about it time and time again. Their assessments are pretty good about the value, and each year depreciates pretty well. But yes, this is a yearly fee that we have to pay. Again, there are tax estimators online that you can go in and search these things to kind of get a good idea of what it's gonna cost. Again, it's always gonna ask value, and like I said, pick Kelley Blue Book and just assume or hope it's gonna be better is I guess the way to put it. Continued on with vehicles. No, there's no vehicle inspections here. And yes, there are some cars with some ridiculously loud exhaust that if you live close to a highway, not even close, we're about probably a mile away from one up the road from us. And if we sleep under windows at night, you can hear brah. And I've had people comment this, that they can hear it from their windows. So yes, unfortunately, without vehicle inspections, people get obnoxious with their loud exhaust. And I feel like they all just cut their mufflers off to sound cool. And speaking of trying to look and sound cool, the Carolina Squad. I talked about this in another video, and it's now actually banned. And for those not familiar, I have a lot of people ask, like, what's the Carolina Squad? What's this band thing? It's those trucks where they raise the front and not the back, so it drives like this, where the butt's squatting. So golf carts are a thing out here. Now, legally, you are allowed to drive a golf cart if it is a 35-mile-per-hour or less road. You do still need a driver's license. I know, trust me, you'll see kids in the neighborhood that don't look like they're old enough to drive, driving them, but legally you do have to have it. And of course, you gotta have brake lights and things like that if you're gonna go take them on the street. So golf carts are a thing here. Now, with that said, side-by-sides are not. I mainly hear this, people from Utah and Tennessee, where driving side-by-sides around is pretty common. Well, here they don't consider them street legal. And with that said, I think the big thing, because my sister-in-law used to live in Utah and now lives in Tennessee, so I've been to both those areas, there's places to ride them, right? Out in Utah, you got trails. We don't have side-by-side trails. I mean, we got a dirt bike track and quad tracks and things like that, but I don't know, maybe, I don't know. Like I said, I get it. But either way, barbecue sauce. So whether you're a Carolina Gold, vinegar, tomato-based, or even Alabama white sauce. Wait, y'all don't think this kind of stuff matters? I mean, you should have seen the comments first time I talked about this. There was a heated debate. I mean, you're all in for a true culture shock if you don't realize how people are serious about barbecue, college football, and so much more. I mean, I'm trying to help you. Anyways, continuing on, I don't think you understand that barbecue is a food group here. Where I came from, what I knew, barbecue was a thing that you cooked on. Where here, like I said, it's a food group. And you cook on a grill, where I guess nowadays it's a smoker, your Blackstone, and now you decide which team you're part of. I'm part of the Pit Boss gang, and there may be some rivals out there in the Traeger or Smokey Joe's team. Anyways, you all think I'm kidding. You appreciate me later on when you go to your first cookout and you have hash and rice, which looks like baby food but tastes amazing. And you put mustard barbecue sauce on your meat. They'll be impressed that you're more cultured out there than people make out-of-staters out to be. Probably giving away too many secrets here. Anyways, people will debate, and I'll show you the map. Again, I'm here in the Midlands of South Carolina. Mustard base is prominent here and up into North Carolina, where I get it. Vinegar and ketchup based are kind of more prominent in other areas. Either way, let's speed this up, save you some time. So some of the conveniences you have, you may not have here. Probably one of the most common is what you see right here on the map. People are often like, hey, Brandon, I want to be close to where the Trader Joe's and the Costco is. Well, fortunately, they're on two different parts of town, so it's not realistic. But either way, some of the things that you ask for, we just don't have here yet. Costco only came here a couple years after we moved here, but hope this puts into perspective. And don't forget, we still got a ton to cover, including crime, politics, housing costs, and so much more. But for all the locals that are going to chime in here and say, look, if you don't like it, then just leave. I completely agree with you. There's 50 states to choose from. Why would you live in one you didn't like? Again, we chose to move here willingly. And I shared these things not to say that is inherently a bad thing, that is just different than maybe where you came from. So you might want to expect this when you move here. To be 100% honest, just as many people as I helped moved here, I've helped just as many decide that South Carolina might not be for them. So you should thank me for that. And on that note, I shouldn't be petty about this, but I have to. Well, I get some of y'all were born and raised here like my children are. Many of you, your families relocated from another state as well. And so my question is, did it close after y'all showed up? Now nobody's allowed to come? My California people, New York, Jersey, and these other states where everybody simply keeps themselves, the biggest culture shock, Southern hospitality. That's right, we were taken back, and I know so many other people taken back by, why are all these people talking to me? Is this normal? I've had so many say this, is that normal? I was in the grocery store and this random person started talking to me. Yes, it is entirely normal. It was a breath of fresh air in the end for us, but at first you're kind of like, what is this all about, right? Where again, some of these other states, people kept to themselves, where you move into a neighborhood and the neighbor, hey, hi, nice to meet you. I live across the street. We even had a neighbor make bread for us. They're like, I make bread. You want me to bake you some bread, right? Those are the things we were looking for and hoping for, but the first time you have it coming from these other states is a little bit weird, and I know a lot of you have been taken back by it. The cost of homes, that's right. For those of you like me coming from California, some of my clients from Jersey, New York, Hawaii, they're taken back by how far their money goes. But I have just as many people that show up and are surprised their money doesn't go further, right? They hear that South Carolina is cheaper than the national average, so they expect everything to be, I guess, dirt cheap. But remember, our average price when we talk about it, especially here in the Midlands of South Carolina, that low 300s is for the average home. I've talked about many times how the average home on Lake Murray on both the Lexington and Irmo and Chapin side is around $1 million. So again, keep in mind, the average price is for the average home. Either way, since we brought up taxes and we're talking about houses, let's talk about non-primary taxes. This gets brought up so many times and confuses a lot of people, and I take a lot of phone calls about this. Made an entire video for investors about this. But yes, we have a primary resident tax rate that you're gonna pay for your property taxes every single year. And we have a non-primary tax rate that you're gonna pay if it is not your primary residence. It's a vacation home, second home, rental, whatever it may be. And what you'll often hear people break this down to as a 2%, 4%, and 6% property tax rate here in South Carolina. Now we have a mill rate, which is just complicated math, and I'll break this down to you in just a second, but 2% is gonna be agricultural, so we're not gonna talk about that in this one. 4% is gonna be your primary rate. You're living in that house as your primary residence. 6% is gonna be what you're assessed at if it is not your primary rate. Again, let me give you a breakdown of what this actually costs you, because that's what everyone really wants to know. And yes, these numbers are real. I've had people call me like, that can't be right, Brennan. No, it's right. I literally just pulled this up today. So Lexington and Richland County, I'm gonna give you those because they're the most calls I get called about. So Lexington County, $350,000 house, to give you an idea. Primary residence, you're paying on average about $2,001.57 a year. If it is not your primary residence, secondary residence, vacation home, rental, whatever it may be, you're paying $10,322.41 a year on average. That's right, that is not a made up number. That is literally right off the tax site today. Richland County, to give you an idea, same price, $350,000 to give you an idea. $2,864.40. Their property taxes are slightly higher than Lexington County. Lexington County is about 0.6%. They're about 0.8% of your assessed value. Secondary residence in Richland County, $11,580.80. Again, these are real numbers off the side. Again, the other thing that gets confusing, primary, secondary rates. Homestead is 65, disabled, blind. That is entirely different than what we're talking about here. Here, you apply, you get your primary residence. Something everybody has to do when they close on a home here in South Carolina. The first time, if you're military active, unfortunately you gotta do this every single year, but you gotta prove that it's your primary residence. They want their tax money. Either way, I'm pretty sure there's one of these in every town, but just in case. College football, so you gotta pick your team. I'm just kidding. You may have already picked your team coming from some of these other states. But give you an idea, if you want to pick, you have the original USC right here in Columbia. You have Clemson, Furman in the upstate, maybe even Coastal Carolina down in Myrtle Beach. Again, I grew up in California. I went to tailgating at a UCLA game. Tailgating was fun. Hardly anybody was at the game, just being real. I know USC had their heydays back in the day till they got in trouble. Either way, it wasn't as big of a thing. Nobody really cared about it unless they went there, their parents went there. Where here, it's It's a thing. And if you go to games, they are a blast. Way funner than the UCLA game I went to back in California. Either way, continuing on. Cemeteries and neighborhoods. Now, this is not every neighborhood, but it's the first time I've ever lived in an area or drove in through neighborhoods where it's like, why is there a cemetery randomly in the neighborhood? Again, it's not every neighborhood, very few and far between, but don't be surprised if you see one in a neighborhood. Cop cars in the driveway. So the first time we moved here, and I've had people say this, it's like, are the neighbors always in trouble? There's a cop car in their driveway. No, most of them just get to take their cars home to have at home, so they're just parking them at that home. So helps deter crime too as well, I guess. Book boxes. So it's this concept of give a book, take a book. I had to have a client explain it to me because I'd never seen it back in California. Now granted, the last time we went to visit California inside of a church, there was a book box, so I was surprised. Again, but very common here. Pine straw. So pine straw is used as decorative around the house. I don't care for it. We switched to mulch, but the pine needles that fall from these pine trees that sit behind us, people collect them and they put them around their house. I know my California people are always like, isn't that a fire hazard? I'm like, probably, but either way. High school football stadiums, they impressed me here, just to be 100% honest. I know some of you have told me that as well. Where I grew up, I played football my freshman year, and we had a little field at our school that we got to play at. But for the JV games, and we actually got to go over there once, and the varsity games, we played it at our local college because they had the big stadiums that compared to the stadiums that you see here for our high school football things. So I tell people all the time, sports is a big thing here. Football, baseball, and so many others. Now, I took a lot of heat for this one last time, but the most advertised and prominent tow truck company in our area calls themselves Hookers. So I don't know if this is a Southern thing or just a marketing thing. And if it's a marketing thing, well, you're welcome, Schroeder's Towing, because it's working. Concealed weapon permits, which now actually they have open carry here in South Carolina. I bring this up because again, many states have a lot stricter rules when it comes to this. In California, you had to justify why you needed your CWP. Here, you got to do your background test. There's a written test as well as there's a proficiency test to get your CWP. And so again, much easier here than some of the other states that some of y'all are coming from. Diversity of food. It's not going to be the same as where you came from. I hate to tell you, everybody tries to come and like, hey, we brought a New York pizza place, but everyone from New York is like, this ain't a New York pizza place. Me coming from California, it's some Mexican food. It ain't the same. So whatever your state has, I promise you, the food is not gonna be as good and diverse here. Tell you one big thing my wife had to struggle with is sushi. It took us a ton of sushi places before she found one that she actually liked. In Akaya, the one that's in Northeast Columbia, loves. Every other place she hasn't, sorry. Retention ponds and detention ponds. I've talked about this before, but back in 2000, the counties implemented this irrigation and drainage plan. And what it meant is every time a neighborhood got built, they had to engineer where all the water's gonna go, right? Because obviously we get a ton of rain, as I've talked about, and so because of all that rain, we need somewhere for this water to go because water sitting along your house is not good for your foundations. And so part of that is the swells that you see around these brand new houses where a lot of people are like, I want a flat yard, why are there all these curves? And that's so the water runs away from your house. But two is what you end up with what's called detention ponds and retention ponds. Detention ponds are one, when it rains, they fill up and then they drain. The drain is at the bottom. Retention ponds are those where the water actually retains in it. Other neighborhoods like mine, you have kind of a dammed up waterway that becomes their retention pond in here. So it'll fill up and there's a drain, it drains out, and the dam, it kind of runs off through the rest of the wetlands. But either way, you'll see these in the new neighborhoods. And this rolls us into no gutters on houses. And this is a big one. But unfortunately, many houses don't have gutters. Just is what it is. I highly recommend that. I mean, I've been given plenty of reasons why they don't, but you should probably put them on the roof because again, this goes back to home ownership. Water sitting next to your foundation is not good. And you go to a lot of these older houses, especially I've talked about in areas, let me break this down even further. So we split between the sand line here in the Midlands of South Carolina, and then we switch to the Piedmont. As you switch to the Piedmont, some of that soil is kind of more clayish, and so when it rains, it gets mucky and it's not great for your foundation. So if you got water sitting there, mucky mud next to your foundation, it starts shifting. You see a lot of foundation issues in these older houses houses, which is one of the big reasons that they created this irrigation and drainage plan. Gutters is obviously going to be a help to this to make water go away. Sand is better for your foundation, but you're still going to have the same problem if water is just pounding down on that sand because it's eventually going to trench it. Either way, you should probably put them up on your roof, especially because it rolls us into the next one. Floodplains. So they are more prominent when you're on the coast, but right here in the Midlands of South Carolina, we do have areas that are still in floodplains. And I tell people all the time, as you can see, it's not very prominent, but it's something you got to keep an eye on. Obviously, we see an average of 45 inches of rain per year, which is above the national average of 38 inches. Now, the best place to check these, I tell people, is going to be the FEMA site, which is what you're looking at right now. It's very finicky to move around, but if you look at the topography map, you can see that there's some low areas, some high areas. And so when you're looking at a house, go to the FEMA site. I have people all the time that are like, hey, you know, whatever real estate home search site says it's ranked as a 3. The FEMA site is going to break it down, as you can see, going back of this, what zone it is and your risk and things like that. In 2015, we had the 1,000-year storm that I've talked about so many times in other videos. And if you know how the FEMA planes break down, they're based on your risk assessment, 100-year floodplains, right? And so they got to really test the theory of these floodplains, and they actually ended up redrawing them after the 2015 storm. So that's why I say lean on FEMA when it comes to this. And staying relative to that, we're gonna talk about the weather, right? Because a lot of people are taken back by the weather. Now, I'm gonna talk about our Columbia area specifically. That's where I am. If you wanna check out some of the other areas around the state, let me know and I can get you in touch with someone. But it is hot and muggy right here in the Midlands of South Carolina. We're known as being famously hot because of the heat. Now, it does cool down in the winter, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but it varies between, on average, 36 to 92 degrees, and rarely below 23. Now, we did have a day that got down to 12 degrees about a year ago or so on Christmas, can't remember exactly. But outside of that, rarely does it get down to that, and rarely does it go above 98 degrees. But again, we've seen that. We do see less than 1 inch of snow per year. So those you coming from up north, you can leave your snow shovels at home. Now, with that said, brings up another point. We're not prepared for these types of things. So don't be surprised if when it gets windy or there's a chance of snow, schools and everything shuts down. I've had a lot of people surprised when it's like, hey, the model homes are closing, the schools are closing, like why? It's only supposed to be a dusting. Well, we're just not prepared for those things. And of course, because of liability, the buses don't want to get blown over. And so that's why you see weather close down schools often. And a lot of people get pissed, but it is what it is. But again, going back, humidity. It's hot and humid here. I'm not going to deny that fact that it's not. And of course, I've talked about before how on average, we see more rain than the average around the country. But another thing this creates is, of course, humid environments, bugs, and termites. Now, we'll start with termites. We get what's called subterranean termites. They come in through the ground and eat up the wood in your house. Now, the benefit is, versus coming from California and some of the other areas where you had the flying termites, where you put the circus tents, fumigate every couple of years and get rid of them. The subterranean termites, they do treatments around your property, little bait stations, and it creates kind of this insurance bond where if termites do get into your house, they are gonna come and take care of it. And so that's kind of the benefit of it. And to be 100% honest, I would not get rid of a termite bond if you have one, because they're here. It's just a matter of whether they're gonna come eat your house. We had a termite bond, and termites actually came up through a crack in our garage. And so they had to come back and treat the garage. So that's why I say, have your termite bonds. Bugs, again, some of you all used to bugs, some of you are not. I mean, I was used to over some bugs, right? But there's some bugs I've seen here that I've never seen in my life. Now, surprisingly enough, when I first moved here, I would see people like, don't worry about that. And I was like, whoa, 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 like freaking out about every single bug. After I've been here now for 9 years, I don't get as freaked out about bugs. I guess you kind of do get acclimated and used to it. Either way, the other big thing, of course, people get concerned about with weather is natural events, natural disasters. That's what I'm trying to say. Hurricanes. So this is the first one that gets brought up. So from 1851 to 2021, 44 tropical cyclones have made landfall along the South Carolina coastline. Of these 44 systems that have directly hit the coast, only 4 made landfall as Category 3+ hurricanes. It's going to be the 1893 Sea Island hurricane, Hurricane Hazel, and Hurricane Gracie, and Hurricane Hugo. There are no knock on wood, Category 5 hurricane landfalls on record for the state of South Carolina. Personally, we've had thunderstorms roll through that had some straight line winds that were worse than the majority of the hurricanes that I've seen come through since living here. Now, with that said, I wasn't here during Hugo, and I've heard a lot of people talk about because it did come straight in from the coast, and they said it was pretty bad. And with that said, obviously we just went through Helene. The big thing, I think it reminded people that the Atlantic isn't the only way you get hurricanes, right? I can tell you here in the Midlands, and I'll talk about what we dealt with, upstate, Greenville, even Aiken got it worse. And obviously you see what's happening up in North Carolina during this. So that's why I say, just because you're inland doesn't mean you're safe from it. Here in the Midlands, my experience, rain wasn't as bad as back in the 2015 1,000-year storm we had, but the wind was probably the most nerve-wracking wind I've seen since being here consistently. Like I said, we've had some storms where the wind hits and it's just like, whoa, hold up. Where this consistently for a long period of time was just this consistent wind that obviously made a lot of people lose power. We were out of power for about 24 hours. I had, coworkers that were out for 3 days, and obviously there's some people in some areas that are still barely getting a lot of this stuff back. But either way, continuing on, earthquakes. That's right, there's a fault line in South Carolina. Now the biggest earthquake was back in the late 1800s in Charleston, measuring 7.3. Back then they estimated numbers by damages. And before you start crossing SC off the list, because I said that, according to the U.S. Geological Survey's Earthquake Information Center, every state in the U.S. has experienced an earthquake of one kind or another. Sorry, you can't get away from them completely. Y'all remember science class, right, with the plates? Either way, to give you an idea, we rank 22nd in the country when it comes to earthquakes, behind neighboring states who have more. Tennessee, Georgia, some of those states you've been looking at. But let me give you an idea of what that actually means. So between back then, when, like I said, they didn't have a score rating, they estimated by damage, there's been a handful of earthquakes, none that they said did any significant damage, all estimated looking back to max at around a 4. Now that they have the ability to measure, the highest recorded was a 4.4 near Seabrook Island, which they say earthquakes in the 4s here in South Carolina are very rare, having only one more record at 4.1. Outside of that, we do get rare mild tremors from time to time, measuring no more than 3.6, but typically less than 2.5. For my West Coast people, you're probably like, I don't even think I would feel that. Trust me. I remember one of the first times we had a little quake here, and it just felt like a semi-truck drove in front of our office. And everyone's like, earthquake. And I'm like, it was? Because, anyways, I digress. Recent though, you may have heard about the cluster quakes in Elgin. So Elgin out here in the Midlands of South Carolina has had this cluster quakes where it's like these regular 1 earthquakes, 2 earthquakes, nothing major, and they don't have a cause and they don't say it's, leading to another one. What they believe happened is this happened before in another part of the state where they filled up a lake or something like that, and it caused kind of the similar thing. And so we had a lot of rain prior to all this starting. So they think that's what started all of this, but again, they're not saying it's leading into something else. And like I said, they've all been 1s, 2s, things like that. Something that I probably wouldn't even notice, but of course, those that aren't used to it in Elgin have noticed it. Continuing on, tornadoes. People often ask where are the tornado shelters, right? You go to these Midwest states and they got tornado shelter here. And continue on with that, basement homes, right? So I'm gonna talk about basement homes and then I'll continue on about tornadoes. So when it comes to basement homes, we don't have traditional basement homes. There's a lot of reasons behind it. Partially is because of our water table. Our water table is relatively low, so you can run into flooding quite a bit. As well, one of the reasons they do them up north, I learned this from my inspector, is that you have to pour your foundation certain depth below the frost line. So here, our frost line is really low, so their footers don't have to go that low. We're up north because the frost line is so low, you're basically pouring a basement just to build a house, so it's like it's already there. Again, I've seen 3 traditional basements in all the homes I've showed over the years, and every single one of them at one point had flooded. So what we typically have when we do have basement homes is what's called a walkout basement, where the house sits on a slope, and so on the front of the house, you're basically gonna see a 1 or 2 story house, and on the back, you're gonna see a 2 or 3 story house because that basement walks out to the back. So you gotta have the topography that works for it. So hopefully that gives you an idea. Otherwise, rolling back to tornadoes, because obviously that's where a lot of this comes up. Well, except for the people that just want to store all their stuff in the basement. South Carolina in whole, though, has averaged 11 tornadoes each year since 1950. Total resulting in 47 fatalities and 1,057 injuries. South Carolina ranks 26th in the United States in the number of tornado strikes. So yes, they happen. Now, knock on wood again, South Carolina has never had a F5 tornado, but there have been dozens of F4 tornadoes throughout the years. Now, interesting enough, you may be driving around outside of the coastal areas and start to see some evacuation route signs, right? Typically those ones you see that are evacuating from the coast are in hurricanes, and the reason that is because of nuclear lakes. That's right, we have some nuclear power lakes here in South Carolina. Now, our main lake right here in the Midlands, Lake Murray, the 50,000 acre play place, is not nuclear. That one's hydroelectric. But Jenkinsville, you're gonna have nuclear on that. So as you leave the backside of Chapin, you might start to notice those evacuation route signs, and that's why it's evacuating those people if a nuclear fallout ever happens. Slower pace of life. Things do not move as fast in this area, neither do people when it comes to the way they operate, the way they talk, and all these other things. A lot of people tell me that, like, Brendan, you talk so fast. It's just a slower pace of life here. Not everybody's in a hurry. I've had people that have called me and said, hey, Brandon, we should have watched your videos before. This pace of life is way too slow for me. They came from the hustle and bustle cities, and whether or not it's what we're rolling to next, finding good work and contractors, right? Things just take a lot longer. Not that it's bad work, it just takes way longer than you would expect in some of these other areas, and that's what people have told me, and some of them have left because they just couldn't stand it. Again, hard to find good work. Contractors, I talk about this all the time. You may call three, one doesn't show up, one shows up on the wrong day, and the other's like, hey, we can do it, they got a great rate, good reviews, and they're like, and we're booked up for the next month and a half. And you're like, well, I need this done sooner, right? Those are the types of thing that slower pace creates. And I've talked about it before, the stop sign. And people talk about this in Hawaii too, where everyone cops to the stop sign. It's like, no, you go. No, you go. Now, again, we talked about in the beginning, the driver sucks. So of course you have some that probably came from New York that get out of my way, I'm going, where a lot of other people are just, and sometimes it's annoying. I get annoyed all the time when people are like, go ahead. It's like, no, you're supposed to keep driving. This is not a go ahead lane. This is a you drive lane. Deer and deer in the roads. We've seen deer in our backyards. I can't tell you how many times I've freaked out. I've told people this is my biggest fear, is deer darting across the road. Can't tell you how many ones you see dead on the side of the road. We used to come back from Charleston, working on the ambulance at one point at night, and it's just the most obnoxious thing. And some of you are like, hey, Brandon, this is no, I'm sorry. Like, where I came from, deer wasn't the biggest fear that we had when it came to animals. You know, as you got close to the mountains, you had mountain lions, bobcats, and all that, but deer was not just, again, this is all different for some people. Other animals, we talked about bugs, but we gotta talk about gators. This one always causes a bunch of drama too. Subtropical climate, gators can be anywhere. But again, what I talked about before, especially here in the Midlands where I am, which is primarily what we're talking about, but some of this is relative to the entire state, talked about how we transition from the sand line into the Piedmont. Gators are coastal plains animal. We are not the coastal plains here. So as you get closer to the coastal plains area, which I mean, I've talked about before, you go down to the Congaree National Park and people have talked about seeing down there, that's where they're prominent. But I don't care how many people post on here, it's been talked about how really isn't any sightings in Lake Murray. I've been in there many times and never seen one once. But trust me, go down to Hilton Head, we've been down there, and they're literally just laying out there. And I have friends that live down in Charleston and they say that they've seen them in the lakes down there. Ma'am and sir, this is another thing. I'll tell you the story of this one too. So my mom grew up in Wisconsin and she moved out to California, and her first boss, she was like, sir, and he's like, don't ever call me that, right? In some other areas, this is offensive. So I know people are like, this should be normal. Some people find this offensive in other areas, but we moved here and everybody's ma'am and sir, and we appreciate it and we're teaching our kids that. But I'm telling you, there's other areas where it's not as common. Liquor laws. So no Sundays with liquor laws. And I've gotten in a lot of heat with this one as well, but all the liquor stores by us, they separate. You got the beer and wine on one side and the liquor on the other. And I tried to search this law last time because people are like, no, they sell them together. And I'm like, I've never seen them together. Now, I don't know if it's because of that, because you can't sell liquor on Sundays, but beer and wine is okay now. That it used to be, but every store down here that you go to, whether it's Greens or you go to Total Wine and More, there's a beer and wine side and there's a liquor side. With other laws though, So zoning. So prior to, there were no zoning laws. That was kind of one of the big things I was always told South Carolina was known for, was the fact that your land, you do what you want. Again, like I talked about this growing up, that the area has done is all of a sudden you shifted and they created zoning laws. But of course, there were many that were grandfathered in. So there are areas not too far from where I live where you're driving down and someone's got, you know, their little car dealership where they sell random buy here, pay here's, and next to it is a house. Across the street is a trailer park, then you got a church, right? This just cluster. And so again, now they have zoning laws and they're trying to, as things sell, change that, but you'll see plenty of areas where it just feels like chaos, I guess is the best way to put it. Guns. People love their guns in the South. And I tell you that this is not a political thing because everyone, oh, well, it's a red state and that's why, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you have what country songs refer to as Southern Democrats, where I'm telling you, both sides of the political aisle and the independents own guns. This isn't just a one-sided thing out here. So be ready for people to talk about their guns and be proud of their guns. And like I talked about before, you got your people that are CWP carrying, and then you got people that are carrying them on their hip. Now, I talked about before, this hasn't turned into Texas where every store you go into, somebody's holstering on their hip, but I've seen it becoming more common. Continuing on, fireworks. So 4th of July and New Year's is a week long. It is not a day. Trust me, you will understand what I mean by that. When you come here and the fireworks, they just continue on night after night after night after night. And I promise you, a Facebook message about how your dog has anxiety will probably only make it worse. HOAs versus not. This is a heated debate online all the time, to live in an HOA or not. I'm a fan of HOAs because I've driven around enough and looked at enough houses that unfortunately I've realized not everybody wants to take care of their house the way that I do. And I get it. You want to do what you want, not have somebody tell you what you can and can't do. I get it. I do get it. But understand, tell people this all the time, neither does your neighbor. I had somebody one time, they were looking, I don't want to be in an HOA. Totally understand. And then they're like, Brandon, that car has like 5 cars parked in their lawn. Like what's going on there? I'm like, it's not an HOA. They can do that here and I can't tell them no. And so that's what you need to understand. You don't want an HOA, but neither does your neighbor. Outside of that, I'm not gonna tell you what you want to do, what you need to do. That is entirely your prerogative. Interstate, not freeway. Again, California, we call it the freeway. Here, people call it the interstate. Talked about as well, when you're driving down the freeway, what I called it, you'd be getting off at Main Street, where here they're like, oh, exit 61. And I'm like, dormant grass. So our grass dormants in the winter. What I mean by that is it turns from this beautiful green to this shade of gold, kind of looks like straw. And so I actually I stopped filming driving tours during the winter because people were like, what's wrong with that neighborhood? Do people not take care of the grass? No, everybody's grass looks gold and it just apparently doesn't look as pretty on videos when I do that, so I stopped. But don't be surprised if your grass starts changing colors. You can't just keep watering it and bring it back. It'll come back next spring, don't worry. Sidewalks, so talked about this before. Look, and I don't wanna continue to debate this. So yes, there are sidewalks when you go to downtown Columbia, downtown Lexington, things like that. But when you venture out 2-lane roads and even some of the 4-lane roads, it's not sidewalks, right? It's just the road just falls off the side and there's no sidewalks. Again, I grew up in a town where there were sidewalks everywhere. I walked to school all the way from middle school through high school. Not realistic here. My child would die trying to walk out on the roads out here. So sidewalks aren't this, and a lot of you ask me that. They're like, hey, where are the neighborhoods where we can walk to downtown? Unless you're literally right behind downtown, it's gonna be challenging. Again, I'm not saying they're not anywhere. There are neighborhoods that have sidewalks in them, but a majority of the areas that we go look at homes are not walkable to downtown, to the grocery store, to anywhere. Sewer charges. So again, this was not normal for us. It was included in our taxes back where we grew up. Here, you pay a sewer fee on top of your water. So you're gonna pay for your water and then you're gonna pay on the way out as well. Our area, it's not metered. Basically, whatever you take for water, they use that as your deciding how much you're gonna get charged for sewer, and then there's a cap on how much sewer you actually pay. Either way. Allergies and pollen. So I've talked about before, we have allergy season here. I have really bad allergies. I never realized how bad they were until I moved here. And you know, get your Flonase ready. I love my Navage. Now I sleep with nose strips. The pollen, I had somebody one time too, like they weren't used to it. and I was talking to him about it, and we're driving down the interstate and there's literally a cloud of yellow going across the interstate. The area is socially, economically diverse. And what do I mean by that? It took me a while to kind of pinpoint what people were trying to explain. So, and I finally got it because the area I grew up in was very similar to that. Where I grew up, and for some of you to talk about this, when you take a zip code or even an area, every house around there is pretty much the same price point, right? The neighborhood I grew up in, everything was kind of similar in price and everything around it was similar in price. Where here, you can have, and I remember the first time I was on the ambulance and saw this, we got a call at this house on the lake, and it was for sale at that time, over $1 million house on the lake. Right next to it was probably at that time a $300,000 mobile home. This isn't even the lake we're talking about. You roll out where I live here, right? You have homes that go probably as high as over 500,000 in our area to, I've seen some sell for probably 120,000. You go to Lexington, it's the same way, right? And Columbia, the same. In Columbia, you get a lot, right? You have multi-million dollar homes in the neighborhood, and the next neighborhood over maybe $120,000. There's just a lot of diversity when it comes to the socioeconomics of the area. The Bible Belt. You hear about it in the songs, the Bible Belt, and this is it. And again, there's churches on every single corner, but it goes beyond that. Just about every job I've worked, every time we had like a company corporate meal, and this is when I worked for the county as well, they prayed before meals. And so not only is the Bible Belt that you see churches on every corner of different denominations, but you're gonna notice it in your days of life. I had some people that they were taken back because they weren't church people, and they felt like their kids were judged for when they asked them, what church do you go to? And they said, we don't go to church. We don't believe in that. And they were like, what do you mean, right? And so that's why I say it's the Bible Belt, and I get it. You know, as a Christian myself, you shouldn't be judging other people, but unfortunately, I'm not saying I am, but the people out there do. So either way, politics. Continuing on, for the more heated stuff that we were told not to talk about at the dinner table. We just talked about money and houses. We talked about religion, and now we're going to talk about politics. My goodness, my parents would be upset. But I have to be honest, one of the reasons a lot of people are coming to South Carolina is because it's a red state overall. Not everybody, I understand that, but many of you have told me that or kind of alluded to it eventually. And let me give you some stats. So in 2020, so I'm recording this before the election, Trump won 55% to Biden at 43%. And then the rest kind of went to independent, green, or other. To give you an idea, back in 2016, Trump won 54.9% to Hillary at 40%, with the rest going to independent, green, or another. So obviously that number has been rising, not decreasing. Now, with that said, there's about 12 counties that have voted blue. So it's not the entire state, but obviously it's the predominant. But the biggest thing I bring it up for is people are passionate about politics. Hence why they message everyone on Facebook from New York to go back home. That's right, they don't want things to change here, and they have no problem telling you that to your face. People are very vocal, you'll see the flags flying. Again, it's something that you gotta be aware of when you're moving to a southern state that is very proud of what they believe in. Vehicle property taxes. Again, for those that weren't paying attention the first time, again, you think I'm kidding, but I have said this in more videos than any other thing I've talked about, and yet I still get taken back by it. Of people like, what do you mean I have to pay property taxes on my vehicle? I already paid taxes when no, it's not what this is. Again, what did I miss? Before we dive into crime, because a lot of this, again, comes from you, and so you helped me in this process of everything. I didn't make up this entire list myself. Every time y'all tell something like, Brandon, I didn't know that, Brandon writes it down and makes a video talking about it. And so what did I miss? I know y'all gonna leave the comments because every time these videos create some of the most colorful comments that I've seen, but let me know, what did I miss? Probably something I missed, and you're gonna let me know. I trust you on that, but let's dive into the fun one. All right, so let's dive into crime. And I gotta be careful here. This is one where I truly could lose my license if I say the wrong thing. Now, granted, many of you have commented and think that as a real estate agent, we just try and hide the bad and ugly because we don't want you to know that Columbia is just a bad area. We are just here to sell a house, right? I wish I could be more blunt, right? I was an EMT. I know some things about the area, but truthfully, the state doesn't see it that way. They see that if I tell you a certain area is bad and has high crime, that I'm steering you away from that area and can lead you down a path to actually a fair housing violation. And initially it frustrated me as I didn't get it, but years later, I kind of started to understand it as I talked to more of y'all. You see, I grew up in California, a town that was consistently ranked as one of the safest cities in the United States. Yet as I got older and got connected with more people, I learned that's because most of these websites that you see online that rank them are based off of reported crime. And if you don't report the crime on paper, it never existed. And this is why they were able to keep ranking as high as they did for so many years. But comments on Facebook pages were littered with how they just weren't reporting the actual crime that was happening. So for starters, that's why these sites are hard to trust and rely on, because they are really just reporting all the crime that's been reported to them. Two, while I grew up in what was considered to be one of the safest towns, I worked on the ambulance down on the streets of Los Angeles in areas that were considered to be some of the most dangerous areas in the United States. Areas where we had directives that as soon as we got off shift, we were to leave the area as it wasn't safe for us to be there off duty, sometimes not even on duty. So when you've seen the best areas and the worst areas, your perspective is somewhat skewed. As well, crime has kind of risen across the country. So all the small town areas that used to be crime-free, allegedly, now all tend to experience some kind of variation of crime. Unfortunately, that town I grew up in, one of the safest still in America, had a school shooting, and unfortunately kids passed away. And so that's why it's tough. But let's talk about the websites. So as you can see, I just picked from the 5 closest states to us, and you can find apps in some of the top areas that you all have mentioned to me. I mean, we can continue to go around the country and do this, but I'll save you some time and know that there's a lot of this around the country. And hold on for a second. You're telling me if me rolling down to Disney World is just as bad as me rolling through Oakland, Compton, Detroit, and St. Louis? I mean, I'm just saying it doesn't entirely make sense to me. Funny enough, I said this in another video and I had someone call and they said, "My goodness, Brandon, I looked at the site and my area is F as well. I've never had an issue. I never knew." As well, I'll give you another one. I made a video comparing Myrtle Beach to Columbia. Statistically, Myrtle Beach showed they had worse crime. Yet one of the first comments was, "I feel safer in Myrtle Beach than I do in Columbia." So who's right? The website or the person in the comments? Well, in the end, neither. It's simply a matter of opinion and perspective. And that's why I just don't think it's fair for any city on this, because clearly there's a bias here. Now look, I get it. You want you and your family to be safe, and I'm not naive. Are there bad areas around Columbia? I don't doubt it. I mean, go watch Live PD, which I guess is now called On Patrol Live, and you'll see crime in the area, and hey, this is a good way to find out where it's happening. Hint, hint, wink, wink, go watch the show. As well, this is a material fact. The first apartment complex we visited, as we sat in the lobby waiting to meet with them, some of the tenants told us not to live there, as the night before there was a shooting, they couldn't come home for hours. And we asked, and the complex just about confirmed it. So sure, it's a big city, things happen. Again, all I'm trying to say is safety and crime is such a personal perspective. I mean, our first apartment, we were told later, it was considered to be in a bad part of town. And while we saw some alleged drug deals and some sketchy behavior, I've been on bad streets in LA and this was not it. Again, perspective. I've had clients ask me if it was safe to go to Walmart at night. I don't know about you, but I visit a lot of states in this country, and Walmart always seems sketchy at night. Like, where do people go in PJs with their butt hanging out? Walmart, right? So how am I supposed to judge whether or not you're gonna feel it's safe? Look, actually going back to Walmart, I had somebody say this is probably one of the best ways to judge an area is go to Walmart, because who goes to Walmart? Just about everybody now, right? And so you kind of get a good idea of who lives in the area. Either way, I've lived in the same neighborhood now for about 8 years, and it's in a part of town that many of you told me you would never live here. Either way, we've had 2 instances since I lived here that I can recall of where kids got caught going through the neighborhood trying to take stuff from cars. It was on camera that they would try doors, but if it was locked, they moved on. Got posted all over social media, and it wasn't just on our side of town. This happens on, unfortunately, all sides of town. Oddly enough, in that same safe town I grew up in, my wife grew up in too, and she said that happened at her house. Anyways, like I said, 2 instances of that in 8 years. We decide to go down to Atlanta to fly back to visit family in California. Got to park at a hotel, leave my car there, and what do you know, I come back and someone took a screwdriver and mangled my door trying to break into my truck. So what does that mean? When you kind of compare crime that way. As well, whether it's the town I grew up in or here in South Carolina, I feel like there's always that highly sought after neighborhood that has a story of when one of the homeowners went crazy. I'll tell you though, let me give you a resource I do like, Lexus Nexus Crime Map. Because it kind of highlights where that crime is. Every big city does have areas that tend to have a little bit more crime, right? You go to the malls and all of a sudden it's like theft picks up there, and you go like, right, that's Myrtle Beach, probably one of the big reasons crime is so high, because you got all these stores down there, they got spring break down there, they got bike weeks, and so you probably got all this stuff that happens that just rises it up for the entire area. As well, you know, I've seen where you get apartment complexes that apartment complex for whatever reason has a bunch of problems, and so it drives up that area. And so with Lexus Nexus, you gotta get a better picture of where that is. Going back, this falls back to reported crime. But in the end of the day, I know many of you aren't looking to live in the city centers where a lot of this crime stats is showing this, right? Specifically in the Midlands. You tell me, hey, I'm looking at Lexington, I'm looking at Blythewood, I'm looking at Northeast Columbia and Lake Carolina, and all these other areas around, Chapin, and so many more. And when you dive into those specific areas, well, they look quite a bit better than the general stats of the area. But again, it still comes down to personal perspective that we talked about earlier. And this is why in the end of the day, your real estate agent is not trying to lie to you and sell you a house. And that's why they're not talking to you about whether or not it's a safe area. And if they do, I'd be cautious they are just trying to sell you a house, but no one would do that, right? No, no one would do that. I mean, it's because I think there aren't any true ways to determine whether or not you're gonna be safe in your home. As a person selling the house that tells you, hey, we've never had any issues in this house, and I can tell you that about my house, they may be right, but you don't know who's gonna move in next door next week. Trust me, right? We've all had that one neighbor in the neighborhood that was the problem house that and you don't know when that person's gonna move in, or if they're gonna move in next door to you and then you have to deal with all the problems. Now, I will give you one resource that clearly can't be biased. There's no bias in there, you can't skirt this one, Megan's Law. So our licensing law does not allow us to disclose information on Megan's Law every time we go to a house. It's literally a contract that says this, but clearly, these are federal records that can't be altered or skewed based on any bias. The only confusion I've seen with Megan's Law is that employees. So if someone uses their home address as their business address and one of their employees is registered on it, sometimes you may see, hey, they're at this house when it's really not, it's their employee. So that's the only confusion I've ever seen with that, but that's something that, again, can't be altered or biased like these crime sites can be. And so that's why I say, it's not that we're trying to hide things from you. Trust me. It's just that my personal perspective may not be the best for you. Life is all about perspective, right? And it's not right for me to tell you whether or not you're gonna feel safe in an area, because an area I feel safe in, you may not feel safe raising your kids. I mean, again, many of you have told me you wouldn't live on my side of town. I digress.